In the User API lesson, you created a route that enabled users to add a product to their cart. Now in this video, you'll create a new route that enables a user to pay for these items using Stripe, a popular developer-friendly payment processor. This route will use Stripe's test mode, so you won't have to enter a real credit card. Sign up for an account with Stripe. Once you have completed the registration process, you should see a dashboard that looks like this. In particular, note the test slider. This means that your account is in test mode, and no real credit cards will be charged. To get started, go to the Documentation tab, and click on the Charging Cards section. This will show you an example of how to charge cards in Node, and show you your Stripe API key. I won't show that here in the interest of not putting my Stripe key on the internet. Stripe has a helpful NPM module that provides you a convenient wrapper around Stripe's own REST API. You'll use this module to charge the user's credit card when they want to check out. Notice that there is one new file, this dependencies.js file. This file will be responsible for setting up Stripe. The dependencies.js file exports a function that adds a Stripe service to Wagner. Notice that it uses this Stripe API key environment variable to authenticate against Stripe. Now you may be wondering why you're using Wagner to create a Stripe service rather than requiring Stripe directly in your API. The reason goes back to dependency injection's core purpose of separating initialization from business logic. The Stripe package requires some setup to work. Specifically, you need to get this API key from somewhere. If you litter Stripe initialization throughout your code and you later decide you want to get your API key from a config file rather than an environment variable, you're in trouble. Better to initialize Stripe once and pass the reference as a parameter between functions, which is what Wagner does for you. The index.js file will now use this file to bootstrap the Stripe service. And now in API.js, you'll define a new route /checkout. This route will take all the products in the user's cart and sum up their approximate price USD field to get the total price of all products in the user's cart in US dollars. So in other words, this function is going to populate the user's cart and add up the cost of every single item in the cart. Now once you have the total price, you need to create a new charge with Stripe. As you might expect, a charge actually charges the user's credit card for the specified amount. The credit card is represented by this rec.body.stripe token field. This means that the client of this API is required to provide a valid Stripe source in the Stripe token field in the request body. A source in Stripe parlance is something that represents a credit card. It can be a JSON object that contains the credit card information, including the number and the expiration date, as you'll see when you write tests for this API endpoint. However, sending a user's credit card to your server opens you up to some significant regulatory hurdles in the US. So Stripe provides the ability to send a token that represents a credit card instead. Now as you'll see when you build out the AngularJS client, Stripe provides the ability to compute a secure token in the browser that lets your server charge the user's credit card without actually knowing what the credit card number is. Now once you create the Stripe charge, you check for errors, and if there are no errors, you empty out the user's cart and save the user. And that's it. Your server can now charge your user's credit card. So now that you have an API endpoint, let's test it. This test is going to use the same old data set with 3 categories for products and 1 user. So we're going to find a user, going to add a product to their cart, and save the user. Now once you have the user, you need to check out by making a post request to API v1 checkout. And the body is going to contain the Stripe token. Notice that the Stripe token is a JSON object that contains the credit card information. This is one of Stripe's designated test credit cards. Now in the callback, you're going to make sure that you got back the correct HTTP status code and make sure that the API call gave you back a charge ID. Now here comes the fun part. Since your test code uses the exact same Stripe service as your API server, you can now use the Stripe service to ask Stripe about the charge. This test then makes sure that Stripe actually got this charge request, as well as making sure that it got the correct amount. Since Stripe expects the amount in cents, the amount is 100 times the cost of the ASUS ZenBook Prime in the sample data.